In Ukraine, a Russian missile attack around Kyiv killed at least 17 people and injured dozens more. The attack targeted warehouses of major Ukrainian businesses and appears to be in response to Ukrainian strikes on Wildberries, the Russian equivalent of e-commerce giant Amazon. Ukraine's air defenses were unable to intercept any of the missiles. The President Volodymyr Zelensky says the attack highlights the crucial need for allies to provide Ukraine with anti-missile defense systems. Claire Sebastian, following developments, she's here in London. And Claire, President Zelensky, pretty blunt in his assessment about what Ukraine needs. What more do we know at this point?
Yeah, Becky, President Zelensky didn't pull any punches. He said in a post on X that the number of air defense missiles supplied to Ukraine has dropped threefold compared to 2025. That's not just over the past few months, but overall in 2026, he said. And he claimed that Ukraine's partners do have the missiles, that this is simply about making political decisions to supply them. And he also reiterated the point that he wants the licenses to be able to produce things like Patriot interceptor missiles locally in Ukraine. You'll remember that President Trump had promised this verbally and is now sort of walking back a little bit on that decision, a bit vague on the US's side, whether or not this will happen. So that's where we are in terms of President Zelensky. But look, this was a major attack. Several dozen ballistic missiles used. 0 of them were shot down. It is, the numbers show, getting harder for Ukraine to intercept them. The last 2 major missile attacks, they managed each time to shoot down just 1. And we've just done some calculations for July. 23% of ballistic or similar missiles that were launched at Ukraine, they managed to shoot down. And when you compare that to other types of missiles, they managed to shoot down nearly 84% of other types of cruise missiles, including cruise missiles, of course. So you can see that with ballistic missiles in particular, this is where the weakness lies. And this is clearly a weakness that Russia is trying to exploit. Now, strikingly, this attack last night really seemed to target the sort of businesses, private businesses, and the trappings of everyday life. There was some pretty shocking footage from a train station, a suburban train station just outside Kyiv, where 8 people were killed. Local officials saying that there was a train delayed, and so they missed their last train, and that's why they were waiting there and hit by a missile. 3 were killed at a post office sorting center as well. 6 people killed at warehouses belonging to the operator of Ukraine's largest supermarket chain. And I think businesses are really struggling at this point in the war. Striking that there was another company that was affected last night, Epicenter, which is Ukraine's equivalent of IKEA, that said they are now urgently looking to move production abroad. This is 4.5 years into this war. They've survived this long, and now in order to survive, they say they have to look at moving production abroad. So interceptors are critical, of course, at this point, but we also have an advisor to President Zelensky saying today that businesses urgently need to diversify the risk, and that perhaps the era of big warehouses is over for the moment. This is a case, of course, he says, of survival. Becky.
Good to have you, Claire. Thank you.
President Zelensky has renewed his call to Ukraine allies to provide it with more military hardware. They say it's required to down the incoming Russian missiles, which are attacking civilian targets in Kyiv and elsewhere. Is the U.S. stockpile issue, though, going to have a serious impact on the war, Iran's war with Russia?
I think it will. And one of the big problems that you have is, when you talk to people from European Command, U.S. European Command, which is the theater that Ukraine is in, they will tell you that there are some significant shortages here. And those shortages that, not only are broadly based in terms of the U.S. inventory writ large, but also very specific to Europe, really will have an impact on Ukraine's ability to defend itself. And that's a significant problem, because in the last day or so, we've had 17 people killed in Kyiv because of Russian missile attacks. The only weapon systems that can really effectively defend against those missiles include the Patriot and the THAAD missile systems. Those are the most effective, and those are the ones that Ukraine needs. And Zelensky has been asking for those for a long time.
So I assume there's a massive effort underway right now to rebuild a lot of those interceptors, those missiles.
This is a problem that we even struggled with in the Biden administration. The defense industrial base is strained, and there are constraints when it comes to producing these missiles. I mean, some of them take 24 months to make. That's 2 years. They're very costly. And so it takes a lot of time. And then I think just getting to what Cedric was talking about on these stockpiles that we're having problems with, that also gets to our deterrence. Part of what makes the United States strong on the world stage is our power to our ability to project power. And when our stockpiles are dwindled, our adversaries are taking note of that. So if there were a conflict that arises in the Indo-Pacific or with Russia, the U.S. military and the president is going to have to make some really tough choices on defending the homeland or potentially engaging in those conflicts.
That's a good point. It could escalate, Dari. We'll see what happens. Sabrina Singh, Colonel Layton, thanks to both of you.
Well, from day one of its invasion, Russia's war on Ukraine has deliberately targeted and killed civilians. It's unleashed missiles, drones, cluster weapons on cities, taken Ukrainian children into Russia, and conducted mass killings. It's also allegedly used rape as a weapon. Now, Russia's reporting that its civilians are coming under fire. According to Russian officials, Ukrainian strikes killed at least 61 people and wounded more than 300 others last week. Per Ukraine, Russian attacks killed at least 377 civilians and injured more than 2,100 in July. It was the deadliest month for Ukrainian civilians since April 2022. Russian leader Vladimir Putin's war of choice has turned into a tragedy for families grieving loved ones on both sides of the border. Our Claire Sebastian has more.
At first, it looks like a game. The man, a vegetable seller, tries to duck behind his van, the drone whining ever closer. But this, Ukraine says, is how Russia likes to spread fear in the frontline city of Kherson. Unbelievably, the 52-year-old victim survived with injuries and hours later was able to recount his experience.
My wife started running away and it started circling over the car. I gestured to it. Look, these are vegetables. But it started charging at me. So I started running around the car. Then we were side by side. It hit me and I just fell. My back is all torn.
CNN has reached out to the Russian Ministry of Defense for comment. Moscow regularly claims it doesn't target civilians. 3.5 years on from these euphoric scenes as Kherson was liberated from Russian occupation, daily life in Ukraine's largest frontline city is increasingly dangerous. Of the 32 civilians killed here in July, 29 died in drone attacks, authorities say. This from late July shows a near miss. Anti-drone nets covering streets, now the new normal here. And so-called human safaris, Russian drones seeming to hunt down civilians in the open, a tactic first used at scale in mid-2024, are happening now on a daily basis here, President Zelensky said Tuesday. This a lucky escape in a war where civilians are paying an ever higher price. Claire Sebastian, CNN, London.